we just smile?
Okay, I think that will be the end of the song. Okay, can I check if everyone can see my voice clearly?
Yes.
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 Okay. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. So, for those who come on time and in time, thank you very much. Um, Welcome everyone to this very session, the Teachers Talk. This is the third session this year, and in this special occasions, we are going to discuss and hear a presentation from Rich on mental health. It's that will be a practical guide, yeah, for us teachers and also for the learners. So yeah, once again, thank you for joining, and I hope we all will enjoy the sessions. Okay, so as usual, before we start, I'd like to give you some quick introductions, especially for those who don't really know us yet. Yeah, so the host institutions is called My English Club. That's us. That's a non-profit community of practice dedicated to English language teachers or future teachers from all backgrounds worldwide. You know, so everyone can basically join us, as long as you're a teacher, of course. And we provide discussion forums and workshops. And on the other hand, we also have the legal umbrella institution, which is called Bangun Tunas Cerdas Indonesia Foundations. That's the legal umbrella for My English Club. The foundation focuses on education and sustainable development goals in general. Yeah. Okay, so this event, this session is called the Teacher's Talk, which is the discussion forum that is start by quick and fast presentations by a teacher presenter, and that will be followed by discussions in the breakout rooms. Yeah, and it aims at promoting peer discussions, also reflective practice, and also to promote intercultural awareness, because we come from a different background, so that will be very interesting. And it's held once a month. It opens for everyone worldwide. So if you would like to invite your colleagues to join us, that would be great. The more the merrier, of course. The more people joining, the more enriching the discussion will be. And if you would like to watch the recording from last year, you can see it in that particular link. And I think I'll just put it on the chat for anyone who, hold on a second, would like to try to see the teacher community, ELT teacher community. Yes, there. Yeah, so if you would like to check out the recording from last year, you can see the recordings through that link. Yeah, that's on YouTube. Okay, and before we start, I'd like to introduce you to myself and also to Yahya. We are the facilitators for the discussion today. My name is Lefi. I can see that there are some people who I never met before, I think. And also I'm an ELT teacher and also curriculum developer. I have my MA in ELT with the University of Southampton. My interest academically and professionally revolves around global Englishes, intercultural competencies, and also in technology enhanced language learning. Yeah, so something like this is my stuff actually. And we also have Yahya, that's him. He's a part-time teacher in 2 different institutions, national and international franchise. He also a tour guide, and he has a BA in English literature with Alauddin Islamic State University in Makassar. His academic and professional interest is in sociolinguistics. Oh, that is very interesting. And also in teaching communicative skills. Okay, so that's all about us. And of course, we need to get to know our moderator today. That's Dian. She's there. She's a stay-at-home mom, which is great because she also have a passion to learn and to teach, especially teaching English. He joined our teaching training back then, and he also a former facilitator at English Day Club and Catholic Youth Community. Yeah, so that's us, myself, Yahya, and also Dian, who is going to be your facilitators and moderator throughout this session today. Yeah. Now, the floor is yours, Dian.
Thank you, Miss Levy. So for today's topic, we're going to talk about mental health, teachers and learners. This topic will be presented by Richard Buckley. We will see in his bio. Mr. Richard Buckley is Master of Education Leadership and Management with Open University UK. He is hold Cambridge Delta. He is a Principal Academic Quality Officer, University of Wales, Trinity St. David, UK. He is a former guidance counselor at University of Wales, Trinity St. David, UK. Taught English with the British Council and in university level. His current project is bilingual English Wales project on mental health. Hey, Rich, how are you? Ready for the topics today?
Good, thank you. Yes, I'm ready to get started whenever you want me to.
Yeah, I think everyone wants to hear about the mental health because I think nowadays is often people talk about work-life balance. And for the next, I'm going to read about the rundown for today. So the presentation will be in 15 minutes. We have Q&A session for 10 minutes. And after that, the next is going to the discussion in breakout room, about 20 minutes. And then after that, you can share all the results of the discussion. We give you 10 minutes. And then after that, the geographical review by Miss Levy, 15 minutes. And for code of conduct, everyone please remain in mute mode during the presentation and the sharing session after the breakout room discussion. And please turn on your video whenever possible. Only whenever it's possible. And this, just to let you know, this session is recorded. So let's not wait too long. Richard, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. 1 second, and I will just share my screen. For some reason, we have this strange technical thing where when I share the presentation, it puts me on mute. I don't know why. And then I have to unmute myself. Very, very strange. Also, just to let everyone know, I don't know why, but Google Chrome is being a bit difficult with me today. So the slides might freeze sometimes and I might have some technical issues. But if that happens, please just unmute yourselves and let me know. Okay, start presenting. So thank you very much for joining this session. The session is on mental health for both teachers and for learners, because I think it's really important that we're thinking not just about the people that we teach, the people we're responsible for, but that we're also thinking about ourselves. Teaching as an occupation is all about caring for others. It's all about being aware of the needs of others. Sometimes teachers can have quite unhealthy habits and start forgetting to actually look after themselves. If you don't look after yourself, then you can't really look after other people either. So it's important that we're thinking about mental health holistically in terms of everybody involved in the classroom. And I'm really keen to make sure that this is a practical guide, that we're thinking from a practical perspective about what good mental health and mental well-being practice looks like in the classroom. To start with, I also want to give you a bit of a heads up, a content warning. Some people find talking about mental health inherently quite difficult. Many of us probably in this call have experienced poor mental health at some point in our lives. Probably 1 person in 3 has a mental health condition that is serious enough to require some treatment or some therapy at some point in their life. And of course, all of us experience mental well-being issues. For that reason, you might find some of the topics a little bit difficult. If you do find the topics difficult, it's okay if you need to step away from the session and return to it. But please do, drop a private message, probably best to Deanne actually as the facilitator, if you're looking for additional support, and we can see what we can do there. I'll quickly cover what we're going to be looking at and what we won't be looking at. The session will look at the difference between mental health and mental well-being. These are 2 terms that we use quite interchangeably, and sometimes we're not clear which one we mean. But I'll demonstrate that there is a difference between mental health and mental well-being, and it's important that you are aware of it, because if you're aware of it, this will help you to manage it in the classroom. And we're also going to look at some practical issues that might come up in supporting learners from a mental health and mental well-being perspective, and some tips that you can use. What this session will not cover is anything medical. I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a mental health professional, I don't work in a mental health setting formally. I'm not in a position to diagnose anybody. I'm not in a position to say what medication you should use or what treatments or therapies you should use. And I can't give you a critical or an informed insight into different mental health conditions. So we're not going to be discussing diagnoses, treatments, or anything medical today. But let's start by looking at that core difference between mental health and mental well-being. People tend to use these terms interchangeably. They tend to use them as if they mean the same thing, but they are actually different. When we think about mental health, we're generally thinking about mental ill health. So we're normally thinking about things like mental health disorders, common disorders that you might have heard of, things like depression, anxiety, trauma, psychosis. Now, what's really important here is that each of these has a diagnosis. Depression in a day-to-day usage means feeling very sad, but depression as a mental health issue is a diagnosis. That's a diagnosable mental health issue. It's a disease, if you like. That's really important, because it's really important to be clear whether we're talking about somebody with depression or anxiety disorder, as opposed to talking about somebody being sad or somebody feeling nervous. If I say I'm giving a presentation to a new audience who I've never met before, I might find that experience stressful, and perhaps I'll feel nervous. Perhaps I'll feel some anxiety. But feeling anxiety in that moment, that's not anxiety disorder. Anxiety disorder is disordered feelings of anxiety. Now, that has to be medically diagnosed. If you're doing a presentation to a new audience and you feel nervous, that's a very normal reaction to the situation. But this is where talk of mental well-being comes in. Feeling sad, feeling nervous, feeling upset, feeling confused, these things can be very normal. They are a normal part of our life. They're a normal part of our emotional response to things. But even if you have great mental health, they can still affect your mental well-being. Somebody can have great mental health, be in a great place in their life, but they receive bad news and it makes them sad. And that might affect their well-being in that moment. So there is a difference between when we talk about mental health, we're talking about things that are medical, diagnosable. We're talking about disorders. We're not just talking about being a bit sad, we're talking about diagnosed depression. But with mental well-being, this is much broader. We're talking about the things that we do to keep ourselves emotionally well-regulated day to day. But we, of course, accept from a mental well-being angle, we accept that you may have feelings that are quite negative. That's a part of life. It's normal to feel a range of emotions. And the response we make to them is different. When we talk about mental health issues, we talk about a medical response. We're talking about diagnosis, maybe psychiatry. We're talking about medication. By contrast with mental well-being, because what we're talking about is how we manage the normal range of human emotions, you wouldn't want to have a medical response to that. If I've received bad news, but I'm not depressed, you don't need to give me medication. That won't help. Instead, what I'm probably looking for is a social response, maybe some information, some support, encouragement, maybe my environment, maybe it's to do with my diet at this point, maybe some exercise would be good for me. Do you see what I'm getting at? You're looking at a different set of responses. If you've got a diagnosed condition, you want a medical response. That's a mental health issue. But if it's just normal emotional responses to bad news or to stress or feeling nervous in a normal way, then a medical response isn't appropriate. What you want is a social response. Maybe you look at how you can support that person through that journey emotionally, maybe think about the environment they're in, encourage them to exercise or to think about their diet. That's a better and a more appropriate response. So this is why it's really important to understand whether you're talking about mental health or whether you're talking about mental well-being. Be slightly careful when using those terms, because if we use them interchangeably, we might end up giving the wrong type of response to the situation. All right. Now, this is called the mental health continuum. And this is a good way of picturing it, is that mental health isn't simply a case of a straight line. It's not like there are people with bad mental health and people with good mental health, and that's the end of it. In this diagram, you can see we've got it in quadrants. So you can have worse mental health, perhaps because you have an illness, or you might have better mental health. But you also might have worse mental well-being, or you could have better mental well-being. So the best case scenario, somebody has good mental health, no mental illness, and things are going well in their life. So they have good mental health and good mental well-being. This is the best case scenario. That's where we would like everyone to be. Realistically, you can't always achieve that, because some people will have bad mental health. They might have a diagnosed illness and they can't do anything about it. If they've also got bad mental well-being because things are going badly in their life, this is the worst case scenario. But I'm hoping that this will move forward now. Oh my days, the slides are being very, very badly behaved today. Here we go. It's worth bearing in mind that in reality, we can be anywhere in that quadrant. So let's take a look at some examples here. Maybe I'm somebody with no mental health illness. So I have good mental health. I don't have a diagnosis of depression or psychosis or anxiety, no mental health issues, but things are not going well for me in my life. That means I'm down here. And even people who have no mental illness will experience that. We've all experienced that. Even if you have no mental health illness, if things are going badly in your life, then you have bad mental well-being, and you probably would benefit from support. Similarly, you might have a mental health illness. You might well, for example, have a diagnosis of depression or a diagnosis of psychosis or anxiety, but actually your life is going quite well, in which case you have good mental well-being. So bad mental health, but good mental well-being means that you're here. And it's worth bearing in mind that we may move around that quadrant in our lives. So the best case scenario is no mental health issues, good mental health, and good mental well-being. Things are going well. That's where we ideally want to be, but that's not always realistic. But let's look at what that means for us then in a practical sense. I'd love to, if it will allow me to move the slide forward. Here we go. Let's take a look at a concrete example here. So we've got two students. We've got Putri and we've got Gita. So Putri has schizophrenia and chronic depression. So Putri has a diagnosed mental health issue. Putri therefore has, you could say, poor mental health because she has a diagnosis. However, she has a great doctor and a therapist. She's sticking to her medication. She loves learning English. So by the sounds of it, things are going quite well. So she has bad mental health, but probably good mental well-being. Now, if we take a look at Gita, Gita is a straight A student, captain of women's basketball, scholarship candidate, probably doesn't have a mental health illness by the sounds of it, but she's just found out she's lost a close family member. So she probably has good mental health, but right now probably has bad mental well-being. So here's a question for you then. If you're teaching both of these students and they're in your class, who do you think is likely to engage better in class today? If you were just looking at mental health and you saw the diagnosis of schizophrenia and chronic depression, the history of bad behavior, your first thought would be, Putri is someone who doesn't engage well in class, and you might bring prejudices towards Putri from that. But what if English is the thing that's holding Putri together? If she has good mental well-being, she can still benefit from class. She can still contribute really positively. By contrast with Gita, Gita's having a terrible day. Gita might be a great student generally, but Gita is having a terrible day today. And Gita might actually have more problems engaging in class. And that means you need a different type of response here. So when we're thinking who is likely to engage better in class today, maybe don't look at Putri's diagnosis, look at what's happening in Putri's life now. If she's engaging well, encourage that. By contrast, Gita might be a straight A student who normally is the first person to put her hand up in class and give the answers, but maybe today she can't do that. This is why it's so important to be aware not just of mental health, but also of mental well-being, what's happening in a mental well-being terms. So here's a key principle for us in the classroom then. What this means is, most of us, I imagine all of us, are not trained psychiatrists. We're not in a position to diagnose. We can't prescribe medication. So we can't really do much about students' mental health. We're not trained to diagnose depression or treat depression or anxiety or schizophrenia or so on. We can't do much about that, but we can do something about well-being. We can ensure that we're responsive to the well-being needs of everybody in our class. Now, of course, there will be exceptions to this. If somebody is very, very seriously mentally unwell, that they're not able to engage in the class at all, that's a different question. But then that sounds like they have poor well-being as well. But the key thing is what we can do is try to make the environment as positive as possible for our learners and also for our colleagues' mental well-being. So that then raises the question, what can we do about mental well-being? I think there's lots we can do about mental well-being. And I think it's much as you plan your lesson to take into account all kinds of different considerations now, you already plan your lessons to factor in the diversity of your classroom, different learning styles, to factor in learners with different abilities for differentiation. You already do all of that. So why not also spend a little time factoring in the different levels of mental well-being that your learners will be bringing to class? Thinking about where your learners are emotionally. And there's 3 levels you can look at this. Let's take a look at this on the classroom environment level, the institutional level. When I say institutional, I mean the school or the college or the university or whatever setting you work in. And also think about our own behaviors and attitudes, because let's not forget how important those are in establishing a relationship with learners and with each other. From a classroom environment perspective, here are some things I've thought about. You've got things like the layout, the background noise in the classroom, the friendship groups that might have established, the tasks you're setting, instructions, technology, when you have your breaks, if you have breaks, what books are available, what screens there are, what tools there are. Have a think about the environment you're teaching in. Think about it from the perspective of somebody whose mental well-being might not be great. If you've got a high energy dynamic lesson, for example, and you're expecting students to be using lots of different tools, there's going to be lots of noise. How might that feel to a learner who's got poor well-being that day? What opportunities are you providing for them to make sure that they can step back if they need to, for example, to gather their thoughts? How do we make sure the environment isn't too intimidating for them? This is a consideration. That doesn't mean don't do anything fun. I'm not saying that, quite the opposite, but it's more, how do you plan in the needs of people who might be finding that experience stressful on that particular occasion? Let's take a look at the institutional environment. So thinking here beyond your classroom and beyond what you're doing in your class, think about the school or the college or the language school or the whole setting. Think about the impact that things like food options, exercise, sports, things like transport to get there, what opportunities there are for recreation, for spiritual support, for instance, for the provision of, say, a chaplain or an imam to support students who might have a faith-based concern. How strong is the school or the university or the environment when it comes to inclusion for diverse students? And think about what services there are for wellbeing support. And this is a bit more abstract, but also think about the ethos or the values of your school.
Rich, I think your screen is freezing, Rich. Can can anybody else hear or see Rich at the moment?
I can hear your voice, but I can't hear Rich's voice.
Right. You're losing him. Wait, hold on.
So he
Yeah.
probably has a bad line.
I think so,
But no.
which is not usual for his case. But let me contact him, okay? So let's just wait for a minute. I'll be right back, everyone.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello there. I think the talk froze somewhere, yeah?
Yeah, great.
Where did it freeze?
I think somewhere in the institutional support, Rich.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, so not long then. I suddenly noticed there didn't seem to be any movement, so. Thank you. For some reason, it won't allow me to unmute myself when that happens. It's very, very bizarre. I don't know why. It comes up with a message telling me, because you are presenting, therefore you are on mute. And I'm like, what? That doesn't make any sense, but okay.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, makes no sense at all. Anyway, yeah, the institutional environment. So an example I was thinking of here, for instance, supposing your learners have 10 minutes to eat their lunch after your lesson. They're probably not going to be very focused. They probably realize that that means they're going to have to run to a cafeteria that's going to be crowded, and they might have to fight to get to them. This will impact on their well-being through your lesson. It will impact on their ability to engage. If you've got learners as well, for example, who are disabled, and because the site is badly designed, it becomes stressful for them to move around the environment. This again is likely to impact on their well-being. It creates unnecessary well-being challenges. I'll move forward here. Another important dimension is to think about maybe our own behaviors and our own attitudes. And I've suggested here some issues around things like tolerance towards people with mental health conditions, empathy, the willingness to take that time to understand patients, being understanding, being willing to be collaborative, particularly here when it comes to working with your colleagues, networking, and thinking also about your continuous development as a teacher. You probably all have memories from when you're at school of a teacher who didn't understand you very well and who clashed with you, maybe because they weren't understanding your point of view. They weren't being empathetic or patient with you. So imagine you're somebody who has some quite serious mental well-being challenges. Perhaps you have a mental health condition that you struggle to manage, and your teacher is not sympathetic to that. Your teacher seems to refuse to understand and is being impatient with you and you've tried to explain your capacity to engage, but your teachers aren't listening. Imagine how much more stressful that makes the environment for everybody. So our own behaviours and attitudes are so important, as is, of course, committing ourselves to continuous development, to thinking about how we can make sure to continue developing our skills and to building our understanding of the issues. And in fact, the fact that you're all attending the session is a good example of being willing to make some of those, decisions to continually develop yourself and your skills in this area. And here's a final kind of quite important point. It's important that you are thinking about your professional boundaries. Teachers sometimes have very, very bad habits when it comes to mental well-being, because teachers sort of often believe that teaching is a calling, not a profession, that this means, therefore, we must always be available for our learners. We should give our learners and their parents our phone numbers so that they can call us any time of day or night with their problems. And it's like, no, that's actually not helpful for anybody. Firstly, it creates a set of expectations that you can't maintain. Secondly, also, remember we said we're not psychiatrists. We can't actually fix things, and we have to be very careful not to create the impression that we can do more than we actually can. If we're not careful around boundaries, we might create a false impression of what skills we have and what we can contribute. Sometimes we might feel that we want to sort of be a bit of a martyr. Some teachers behave a bit like this, where they'll want to dedicate themselves to the well-being of every single one of their learners. And it's like, that's actually not very effective if it just means that you make yourself ill, because you end up then not being available for anybody. It's much better to treat it as a marathon, not a sprint. It's better to sort of look at how you can sustain a good level of support for your learners, but not be trying to do everything for them. Another thing, though, is to think about the institution. Very often, and I have seen teachers do this sometimes to each other, sometimes, I know this because I'm sometimes a little guilty of this too, a colleague will be struggling with a group because the group seem quite difficult to engage, and that could be because of mental well-being issues. Other teachers will take the view, you just need to put them in their place, you just need to kind of get in control of this. And it's like, actually, it might be more helpful if you support your colleagues in that situation and say, okay, let's talk about the issues that you're facing and let's look at some strategies. Think about how you can work together. I think everyone who has been a teacher who's taught a difficult group knows that it can make you feel quite lonely. You can feel quite alone when you're trying to motivate and engage a group who are difficult, particularly when you feel that this group don't particularly like you for some reason. That can be quite a lonely feeling. And I think it's very important from a teacher's mental well-being perspective that actually we support each other in the staff room in those situations, and we're willing to talk to each other about our ideas to help each other through these challenges. And finally, this is maybe more difficult. Is it possible, if you feel that the school or the university or the institution where you work doesn't have a good culture on mental well-being, would you be willing to have a difficult conversation with head teachers, with the people in charge where you are? Would you be willing to say to them, I think the school is not really thinking about the needs of learners and teachers who are facing mental well-being challenges? Your answer to that question might be, no, I'm not doing that because I'll get fired. That depends on your particular context. But have a think, could you have this conversation? If you have concerns that the institution that you work for isn't really a good place for people with mental well-being challenges, perhaps it's a conversation you could try to have. You may conclude, no, I'm not going to do that. That's up to you. But it is something to think about. Like, could you have that conversation directly with the leaders? Could you present to them ideas on how you could make the institution as a whole a more supportive environment? That's everything from me. So thank you all very much for listening. I hope you enjoy the discussion. And I understand now we're doing questions. So I'm open to any questions from the floor if anyone has any.
Yeah, I think it's, wow, I never thought about that. From this,
Me neither.
it's a great presentation, Rich. So if anyone has a question, we have 10 minutes for you to ask. If you want to ask, maybe before we start the discussion today. Anyone? So if there's no question, oh, Miss Levy, yeah, you can ask Miss Levy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to start if that's okay. So yeah, my question is this, Rich. What do you think about involving the school's stakeholders in order to, improve or attempt the, to improve the learners' well-being? How, according to your own experience, how much will it be possible, and how much do you think that will be effective to really improve the learners' well-being, do you think?
That's a good question. I think it might depend on how broadly you're defining stakeholders here, because it can really, really depend. So, and this also may depend on the culture where you're working. So, for example, in the UK, in universities, if I'm supporting a student who has a mental health issue, or maybe is facing a challenge that's affecting their mental well-being, I would only involve other stakeholders in two situations. One is if the learner agreed that I could, or the other is if I thought they were actually in danger. But that's because in the UK, we have very strict laws around data sharing. It's called the GDPR. I think Indonesia has an equivalent of it. There are very strict laws on data sharing, and you can actually get in quite serious trouble for sharing something inappropriately. So I would normally always take the view that if I'm supporting a learner, I would always want to have their consent before I involved any other stakeholders. Having said that, if you're talking anonymously and in general terms, I think involving the wider community in conversations about mental well-being, saying we know that there are issues in this community with mental well-being, we'd like to work together as a community to address them, involving stakeholders in that kind of more general way, I think is a very good idea. Because, as we said, the environment as a whole in the institution is so central in ensuring learners have good well-being. If you've got, say, learners who, so imagine you're, say, a wheelchair user and you've experienced, I don't know, say maybe bullying or isolation in the past. And then on top of that, in order to get to school, you have to take your wheelchair across a busy highway with no easy crossing point, which means that every day you've got this very stressful experience. This is the kind of thing where the involvement of external stakeholders in understanding how to create an environment that's better for everyone is so important, because that's a conversation for the school to have with transport, for instance. So yeah, I think there is a role for involving stakeholders, but I think the principle of consent is important. I think it's important that where possible, assuming that there is mental capacity, to use the legal term in the UK, that you involve people in decisions about them, if we're talking on the individual level. Does that answer your question, Nevi?
Yep, thank you.
Grand.
All right. So any other question? One more question? Oh, okay. Ayumi, you want to ask a question?
Well, thank you. So I just want to ask your point of view, Rich, that I have a student, and then his mom told me that he has like mental issue diagnosed by the doctor, that he couldn't make like friends easily at school, and it's also impact his academical performance in the classroom. And it comes to conclusion by the parents that my student became like has like insecurities because of his being like minority, because he's a Muslim, only the one Muslim in his classroom. So, and then his mom told me to take like take a role as the Islamic teacher for him. Like, how do you think I can take this role? Like, how can I do to help him if I could help? Thank you.
That's a really interesting question, and it sounds like quite a challenging situation. I think one important point there is, if the student has like a medical condition that means that maybe they find it difficult to make friends, then I think if we're thinking, remember we looked at the classroom level, the institutional level, and our own attitudes and approach to the situation. If you're looking at the classroom level, I would be thinking in terms of how do we design activities that make it possible for this learner to be comfortable and to play a positive role. So one thing I've done in the past, for example, I use quite a lot of group work in the classroom. I have some learners who I know are unconfident. That could be because of a mental health issue or a learning difficulty. Sometimes I create kind of team captain roles where the team captain doesn't really have to do anything apart from cheer the rest of the team on. And I sometimes deliberately assign those roles to learners who I think will struggle with the task itself, but who would benefit from an opportunity to be in a positive role. Do you see what I mean? Where other people can look to them as a positive person. So I'd be trying to find ways to include them in a way that they're comfortable with. That may be easier said than done, and it might be that different things work at different times. It could be difficult to predict what will work, but I would try creating activities where it's possible for them to play a positive role that they're comfortable with. And I'd also be thinking, if the learner is maybe isolated from their peers because their peers have a poor understanding of their condition and are maybe discriminating against them, then I'm wondering whether I might build some anti-bullying education into the curriculum, find ways to build that content into your teaching if that's appropriate. And you can be quite subtle about that. In the UK, for example, and in another country I've worked in, I'm not saying which one, I've had similar issues with racism in the classroom, where I started to build anti-racist education into things, because I've had concerns about, if this makes sense, you don't want to be constantly having to discipline people. So instead, I'm like, right, instead of me constantly disciplining the class, I would rather try to work to educate the class about why this is a problem and why we need to collectively stop it, if that makes sense. In terms of the second part of your question, though, which was about whether as a Muslim teacher to a sole Muslim pupil in the class, I think, Ayumi, maybe this is up to you, to what degree you feel there's a role for you to play as a Muslim role model. And I think maybe there's a question as to how comfortable you are with that. Because personally, I would argue that just because you're a Muslim teacher and there's one Muslim pupil doesn't mean that you have to be the role model, I would argue. But maybe that's up to you. If you feel comfortable with that role, maybe you can play it. But if you don't, I don't think you should have to. That would be my view. Well, I don't know. What do you think? Where do you stand on that?
Sorry. So here are the things that this is not from my school. So I'm teaching privately, Islamic teaching, Islamic, right? And then this case is from their school in the USA. So because I'm very close to his mom, and then so his mom telling me like, can you help for this, because he can't even perform for the assignment from the teacher because of, especially for like peer assignment and in daily basis. So his mom like think about like, this is so dangerous actually, because his academic also become very decreased after this. So she told me that, can you help for this? And I can only probably just share about how to become from victim point of view, maybe, because he got like bully, I think, in the classroom. And I have some students like this, not only one. So, and the parents told me like, can you help when you teach him? But I don't have any like access to the school, especially the teacher in this case. The parents told me that teachers didn't notice that. So probably because he's the one was in there. Like, it's probably something not really, because she
Mm.
said the teachers also didn't really notice that. So yeah,
It
probably.
could be. I don't know where it is in America, but if the pupil is the only Muslim in their class, it's possible the teachers just don't have much experience of recognizing Islamophobia or recognizing. Do you see what I mean? It's an issue that, for example, in the part of the UK I'm from, which is very rural, in the countryside, we don't have many kids who are not white. As a result, teachers are quite bad at recognizing racism. They recognize it when they hear very offensive language, but most racism is more subtle. You know, it's more like you say, it's more making people feel excluded in a subtle way. And teachers are not always good at recognizing it if they've never recognized it before. So that could be the issue there from what you've described. I think that's difficult, but I think the parents are probably doing the right thing by talking to the school directly. I think it's important that the school are aware. If the school continue to handle it badly, I don't know how much educating them we can do. Like you say, it would be helpful if you could talk to them. This is quite a big issue by the sounds of it, but thank you for sharing that, because that is quite a complex issue. It shows how complex our learners' lives are and the kind of the different factors that lead to, you know, challenges to mental well-being. Absolutely. So thank you for sharing that.
So may I ask her a question, like how old are those students? Is it old or is it young learners? So because is it young or young learners or old ones?
There are young learner students, and also there are teenager students.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe, so I can suggest that maybe you can make like an activity, a reflection and activity between each other. And you can give them a different role on a society. For example, you can give them a situation like, so I'm going to give you an example. So yesterday I was studying for a managing class, and we had study about the study case in that. So the teacher given us different situations, like different positions in the society. Like, for example, you are a doctor and your friend is a teacher, another one is another position. And they give us all of us like a message that in this area, for example, in the city, we want to create a new project, for example, and we have such this amount, for example, from the government, and they want us to agree about one of the projects. So everyone has his position and everyone has his own project. So how we can convince each other to choose only one project, for example, that it can have a sustainable effects on this area, and also can give us a more incomes too. So this exercise will give us like a reflection that we are different, and we couldn't agree about some points. That's the most important thing. So we couldn't agree that it's true, for example, that it's gonna be right, that's gonna be, so everyone wants to defend his idea, everyone wants to be the first in the first place. So that's why you have to make like this kind of activities that will give them more reflection about themselves, that we are different in the society and we have to manage ourselves to live together. So yeah, it's gonna work well. So that's I think this kind of activity that will help the students to reflect more about their life, how they live in the environment, how they manage, like how they think about the others, how they how can I know, they understand others, what the others said, and also understand more about different cultures, about different religions too. Because in this world we are different, even we are in the same religion, for example, or in the same community, or in the same family. Even the same family, you are different from your brothers and sisters. Not exactly. So you have to aware to concentrate more about their awareness about the issue, about their awareness, if they're aware or not. Because the most people, they're not aware they are not aware that they are not aware they are not aware, for example. So I'm gonna write it down maybe. So most of
Okay.
people.
Okay,
Okay,
thank
I'm
you
gonna-
very much for the insight. I think it's very interesting topic. So I think we have a interesting discussion here before we go into the real discussion, I think. Because the time is we have a very limited time. I think maybe now it's time for us to go to the breakout rooms to do the real discussion. Yeah, so let's
Yeah, I'm
start
just
for the discussion then.
yeah, sorry, I'm just going to share the question here. Yeah, before everyone go to the breakout room.
Yeah.
There we go. I hope everyone can see my screen sharing. I'm going to present it a bit more if I can. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, so these are the questions. So if anyone would like to have a look and read it, scan it real quickly, or to take a
Could you please
screenshot.
share it back with us in the chat box? Was it possible?
That will be possible. Okay, I'll just try to do that then, yeah.
Okay.
Before I send everyone to the breakout room. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The it's on the chat. If you can see it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so should I do it now, Mbak Dian? To send everyone to the breakout room?
Yes, sure. So let's start the discussion, Miss Levy. We can start it now
Okay.
because the time is tickling.
Yeah, I know, right? But it's really good discussions. Okay, so 3. Wait a minute. I'm just going to move myself exchange to Okay. See you in the next 20 minutes, I think, everyone. Yeah, 20 minutes. And by the way, don't forget to assign someone to share your discussions in the main room. Yeah. See you soon.
Seems like it's very
That's
interesting and hot discussion.
yeah, we haven't
Like-
completed all.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
haven't completed
now
all
in the
answers.
main room.
Questions.
Everyone is talking. Yeah. So who's going to share from the room one? Anyone from room 1 who wants to share?
So
So,
maybe
Taufik, please. Taufik, please. Taufik, please.
So, because we have different answers, so I didn't remember all of them. So the most important thing, so we have to be aware that the teacher doesn't need to be concentrated only on one template, because he's a human being, he has his limits. He has to be, or she or he has to be honest on himself, that they are not going to manage all the things in the class. So he needs to do his efforts to understand more about his students. So I really still recommended about the kind of activities, that the free activities, not according to the class, but this activity that will give you like to understand more, to understand more yourself, how for example, how they reflect to the different ideas. But the ideas, so the subject must be very, how can I say that? The subject must be very concentrated about some points. For example, if you want to teach them about racism, for example, if you want to teach them about other things in society, and to see their reaction about that, yeah, you have to be careful about choosing the right topic, right? And also to see how they think about the things, that you can know how, because the students before coming in the school, they are impacted by the environment in their family, for example, and also they are imitating their background in the family. So if they believe on something, you cannot easily change that. So with time, you can work that. With time, you can change that. And also the teacher need to work on themselves too. Teachers too need to understand more about themselves. Yeah. And they are also affected by the environment too, because they are human beings too. So they have to manage that impact and to know how to manage that impact, right? To, how can I say, to equilibrate things between students and themselves and the students, the teacher itself. That's I think that's all. But maybe
Okay.
or Penny, if you have to share some more ideas, so you can go ahead.
Thank you. That will
Okay,
be
thank you
all.
very much. Sobe.
You're welcome.
Oh. Okay, that's from room 1. So I think because of the time, we need to hear from room 2 too, I think. So who's going to share for the room 2?
I will take this opportunity. So I am Amy from room 2. So talking about this bullying, yes, it is quite serious, but most of the time we thought it's a simple thing like labeling and calling by our like body shaming and stuff at school. Sometimes we just think it's like a joking, but actually it's a serious thing because it could affect the mental issues to the kids. So many cases that I find out, the student of mine also get bullying at school, and I think one of the thing that we can do about these things is to involve not only the student but also like the parents and all the stakeholders at school to talk about this, that this is something that we have to increase our awareness about. So yes, I think that's something that we have to pay attention and to really try to find like a solution, and not just like think that it's a simple thing. This is just a joking thing, but we have to take it serious that this is may happen. Like we might loving, but it maybe make that kids have mental issues. So I think that's it.
Wow, that's quite nice sharing. Thank you, Emmy, for your sharing. And for the room 3, wants to share?
Miss Ayumi?
Sorry, I didn't know which group are we. Okay, so thank you. So we discussed 2 things from the learners, and also, I mean, the learners' point of view, and also the teachers. That only 2 points we didn't share or discuss about the institutional because time was so limited. And from that, we got that as a teachers, how we improve our students or learners, the well-beings that we need to have. Like we agree that we need to have also what we call as like personal approach. So for each students, as they have different personalities in a classroom. And the second one also, we need to be aware of giving rewards and punishment, and to make it balanced. We agree that these things also affect how how to deal with their well-beings. And also the last is the motivation. Again, we as a teacher, we need to give them motivation, as well as the learners as a teachers, also how we level up the well-beings itself. Then we all of us agreed about that we need to learn more, especially the psychology. We need to learn more because probably we only think about how we deliver our classroom, like how we set the activities, how we give the the subjects itself, but we didn't really probably aware about um, the students like mental health and whatsoever. And we also agree that as a teacher, we need to have like teachers support teachers, that the sharing session like this one, we really like this, because this is also one of the way we keep make our well-being stable. And then yeah, some also the other also by Miss Devi and also Miss Rahma was talking about like how we as a teacher also can enjoy the break. I really enjoy the break. So when you have a break time, you need to enjoy that. Like you need to refresh, you need to have your healing, and then don't think about the assignment whatsoever. This is probably simple, but it can recharge our energy to face the next semester or the next class. And the end about the challenge, we talk about the different personalities would be the challenge for us to improve these well-beings. And also probably it's gonna be about the parents' expectation and the environment, like from the family and from the friends. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Miss Ayubi, for the sharing. Yeah. Miss Levi, do you want to say something?
No, nothing. Just to give a clap emoticon.
I have a little,
Okay,
I have like a suggestion, like, so I think so the school make like a little club for all the teachers in the school with, it like they do like frequently a training, or so like a day or 3 days training for the teachers. So about with some professionals on that field, it's gonna give a little, it's gonna be a very nice idea to improve, because there's most of the teacher or majority of teachers, they are not aware that mental being can mental well-being can have a great effect about a great improvement about their students learning, right? So
okay,
that's very, very important, right?
okay.
And
Okay,
also
thank
I
you very
really
much,
thank you
Taufik.
about this section. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your concern. And
Okay.
now I think it's time for Miss Levi to pedagogical review.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Go on, Miss.
Yeah. So first of all, congratulations, and also thank you so much, Rich, for the inspiring and insightful presentation as always. And also thank you very much for everyone for the enriching discussions in the rooms. I witnessed it in my own room, and I witnessed it here as well in the main room. We can keep discussing this topic for hours, I think. Yeah, and I really hope that we might have to think about having a dedicated you know dedicated training for this or something like that. Yeah, but that's something for next time. So in relations between mental well-being and pedagogy, I think we are it's it's widely acceptable, and I think we'll all agree that mental well-being will contribute to the academic performance, but also in life as general. And so therefore, mental well-being will be related to not only to the emotional aspect, but also the cognitive and also the social aspect. And so therefore, our teaching practice, I think, should ensure learners to feel safe, to feel respected, and also to feel supported. And we are here some of the real case from our colleagues here. There are issues with discrimination, so there are issues with bullying. So it happens, right? So this is what happens to our world, and this might be something that we need to work on as a teachers. Okay, so in his presentation, Rich has reminded us that there are some of the area that we can do much about it, which is the mental health. We might can do things, but just as far as recommend our learners to meet a professional, perhaps that's all. Yeah. But then in terms of mental well-being, there are some that we can do. And this is the area that is manageable. And let's just focus on this then, because this is that still under our control, something that we can still do things about. Yeah. And he also mentions modification in the positive terms, of course, in relations to our own attitudes and behavior as a teachers, and it might be also related to the teacher-learners relationships. How is it going to be? Is it top down, or is it going, or can we make it more equal somehow? Yeah. And also the modifications on the classroom layout. And I think for me, it's also related to the instructional design on how we deliver our lesson and how we design the task and also the assessment, as Richard said, has it inclusive enough to cover the diversity of our students. Yeah. And I think one thing that is important is that to try to integrate these issues about well-being and the relatable issues, for example, the bullying, in our own teaching practice, and we might want to, and it might be related to integrate culture in language, and it is possible. This is possible. This is something that we can do. Of course, there are some methods, some techniques, but it's possible to be done. Yeah. And also modifications in the institutional support. Maybe we can attempt this. Maybe we can suggest the school, for example, to do something with mental awareness. Maybe we can work hand in hand with parents committee, with the school, to build a program for mental awareness and with bullying. Then I know that it has been done at some schools, and it's really great, and I hope it can be applicable to more and more schools, not just in Indonesia but also worldwide. Yeah, hopefully. Okay, just a very few more things to think about. So in order, I think, to be taken to support these modifications that Richard has mentioned in his presentations, what I have in mind is to consider to be more reflective, and to borrow Richard's favorite word during the teacher's talk, empathic teacher. So we might want to consider and ask ourselves to be more reflective, and ask ourselves, for example, whether have I as a teacher has provide a positive support, a positive feedback perhaps to the learners. If they made mistake in doing their task, what did we say? What did we say when we disagree with their opinions? What was our word options. Did we say, oh, no, you were wrong? Or did we say, oh, I see your point, but blah, 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 blah. And actually, by doing so, not only that we become the role model of become a more tolerant and open-minded teacher, but also we also teach them some communicative and pragmatic skills, actually. Yeah, so these things can be done. And we can also ask ourselves, have my task and my assessment inclusive with the learners' learning styles and also their background. For example, if we assign them tasks like or project to make video, have we are sure that everyone has the appropriate devices, the suitable devices to do this task? Can we be sure that nobody would feel left behind by the task and the assessment that we made, that we assigned to them? Yeah, so being a reflective and empathic teacher can be like one little step that we can take, one realistic step that we can take, but it might be useful as well. And this can be done also through need analysis, so something that you might be familiar with. Yeah, so by being a reflective teachers, we can conduct a need analysis, which is not as complex as an action research, for example, but it's still very useful, and it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be a research, but it can be as easy as have a discussions during the break with your students, ask them how they are going, how things at home, what kind of tasks that they enjoy, what do they think about your teaching practice so far, and so on. Or maybe you can ask them to fill out some Google survey in Google Docs, use their phone. It can be a fun excuse for them to use the phone during a class time. Yeah, so yeah, we can do that, I think, by be reflective teachers and conduct a need analysis. Yeah. And I would like to share very quickly this page that I found. This is a well-being there. If you would like to click it now and just look through it later, that's a student well-being hub. I know that's from Australian department, but I have seen through it, and I think it's quite relevant, just to give us some reference on how to do anything, or how to improve our learners' well-being. Yeah, and very last one, in relation to our own well-being as teachers, there are two tips that I would like to share. The first one is the tip that I got from my friend, from my former colleague, and she said that
habis makan dibakar dulu.
Somebody is enjoying a dinner, so yeah, she said that she loves to take a toilet break, if that makes sense. Yes, so whenever she feel that she is overwhelmed in the middle of the class, she will just excuse herself to go to the toilet and just have a little break for a few minutes, just to take some deep breath, to wash her face and all. So I think we can do that too. And the second thing is that to ask for help. We have lots of roles in our life. We usually are not just teachers or parents, or but we usually have more than 2 or 3 roles happening at the same time. So it's totally fine to acknowledge that we need help and ask for help.
Okay,
That's it from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for the pedagogical review, for the presentation today, Ms. Levy. Yeah, I think it's I never thought about that before, but I think it's going to be one of our concern as a teacher. And the presentation today is very, gives us insight, I think. So that's all for today. Maybe before we close the teacher's talk today, could you please open your camera? We're going to take a picture. Okay. Miss Levy, could you please help me to take the picture?
Sure. Okay. On my count, 3, 2, 1, choose. Okay, once more. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Yep. Done.
Okay, thank you very much for attending to our teacher's talk today. So see you in the next month for the other topics. Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a nice day,
everyone.
everyone.
Is there any
Thank
form
you.
that we need to?
Thank you, everyone.